John Ferrugia, who's been following this. The 7 News investigators, John, have been all over this in terms of piecing together information about this individual. The chief, understandably reluctant to talk about him, but you've been able to find out a great deal.
Well, Mike, as you know, federal, state, and local law enforcement teams are investigating the shootings, and so many witnesses have now spoken about their experiences. So using our sources, we pieced together a pretty clear picture now of how the alleged killer was able to carry out his deadly mission. Sources familiar with the investigation say witnesses saw James Holmes enter the theater as a patron, having purchased a ticket. He sat for a bit as the film began and then left the theater by an emergency exit, propping the door open. According to law enforcement sources, Holmes went to his car, moving it to a space just outside the back door. There, he suited up in full body armor, including a helmet, vest, and even a neck shield. And then he entered the theater. Sources say he threw 2 smoke or tear gas bombs and began firing with 3 weapons, a 12-gauge shotgun, a .40 caliber Glock semi-automatic handgun, and a high-powered AR-15 assault rifle. Another Glock was in his car. Aurora Police Chief Dan Oates says Holmes had acquired thousands of rounds of ammunition and many high-capacity magazines for both the Glock and the assault rifle, as well as hundreds of shotgun shells.
My understanding is that all the weapons that he possessed legally, and all the clips that he possessed legally, and all the ammunition that he possessed legally.
A person knowledgeable about the investigation says Holmes also had a large drum magazine for the assault rifle that could hold almost 100 rounds. According to sources, that 100-round drum may have jammed during the shooting, possibly stopping the carnage. When Holmes exited the theater, he went to his car and was confronted by at least 2 of the many officers that had arrived in minutes, and Holmes surrendered without incident. Now, because Holmes was dressed in black tactical gear and he was wearing that gas mask, Aurora officers at the scene first mistook him for one of their own, but sources say that one of those officers noticed his gas mask was not department issue, and Mike and Ann, that's what caused them to confront him.
And so with that confrontation, John, and being able to talk to him, were they able to communicate with him in any way? What did he say?
Well, on the initial arrest, he told police he had acted alone, and he warned that there were explosives in his apartment that were going to blow up if they were tripped. And according to our sources, Holmes may have been so calm when he surrendered because he told the officers he'd taken a dose of the painkiller Vicodin about 2 hours before the shooting. Meanwhile, we've learned that Holmes has not been cooperative, and according to sources, he asked for a lawyer almost immediately after arriving at police headquarters for questioning. And finally, something that's very important today, we saw the emotion of Chief Dan Oates. It really showed when he was talking about what his officers endured. And really, today, talked to a number of people, and according to one source, it was so terrible in that theater. When police entered the theater, it was a very disturbing sight. Wounded and dying people on the floor. There were strobe lights flashing through that smoke, those smoke grenades, alarms going off. And all the while, as they were there, that Batman movie was still playing on.
The Call 7 investigators digging into the suspect of the movie theater tragedy, his behavior bizarre in court today. And as John Ferrugia tells us, police describing his demeanor Friday strange as well.
You have a right to remain silent.
Even as the judge was addressing Holmes, he seemed disinterested and aloof. And at times in court, he sat wide-eyed. At other times, he seemed almost sleepy. When James Holmes was confronted by police as he exited the theater after the carnage on Friday morning, he told them he acted alone and that his apartment was full of explosives. But sources say it was when Holmes was taken to Aurora headquarters and placed in an interview room that they began noticing Holmes' strange behavior. Sources familiar with the investigation say he sat wide-eyed, staring at the wall. His eyebrows were twitching. Sources say he seemed totally unaffected by what he had just done in the theater. And they say when police detectives put bags over his hands to preserve any gunshot residue as evidence, Holmes began to play with the bags, motioning with them as if they were 2 puppets talking with one another. In his first court appearance, he seemed equally disengaged. As we first reported on Friday, sources close to the investigation say Holmes took the powerful painkiller Vicodin about 2 hours before the shooting, and some sources have speculated that he was numbed and subdued as he carried out the killings. But he seemed to have the same demeanor in court, and sources confirm that since his arrest, Holmes is not taking any medication. 7 News reporter Marshall Zellinger is asking tonight about the doctor-patient confidentiality rules. Marshall, you found limitations for when a doctor can report a patient to authorities.
Yeah, we wanted to know under what circumstances would a psychiatrist alert law enforcement to something of concern. Did Holmes ever mention a shooting to the psychiatrist? Well, here is a document from the American Psychiatry Association that reveals that a psychiatrist can only reveal and break confidentiality if imminent danger from that patient. James Holmes sent a package in the mail to the University of Colorado Anschutz campus. It was received Monday, addressed to his psychiatrist, Dr. Lynn Fenton. We reviewed her biography. She's an award-winning psychiatrist specializing in schizophrenia. She provides medication and psychotherapy for up to 20 grad students per week. Information she has about Holmes may be protected by doctor-patient confidentiality. Regarding the mail he sent her on Monday, his defense team told the court, quote, "The package include communications from Holmes to Dr. Fenton that Holmes asserts are privileged," meaning doctor-patient confidentiality. Info that should not be revealed to the public.
Any communication that goes between the doctor and the patient is confidential, as long as it does not affect the welfare of the patient himself, herself, or anybody else.
Dr. Wojciech Zulczyk has 15 years' experience in treating psychiatric patients. We wanted to know when a psychiatrist would be required to alert law enforcement about any danger discussed during an appointment or even by mail.
You need to have somebody say, I'm going to go and kill blah, blah, blah.
But that blah, blah, blah has to be a specific person's name.
Correct.
We also found this document. It's from 2005 from the Colorado Board of Examiners. Dr. Fenton was reprimanded for prescribing things like Vicodin, Xanax, and Ambien to herself, her husband, and an employee without keeping the medical records. She volunteered 50 hours getting more medical education and was also told that she could only prescribe medicine to bona fide patients. What does this have to do with this case? It's tough to say because of the gag order. We really don't know if this has any impact on the current case. Reporting live, Marshall Zellinger, 7 News.
The Call 7 investigators breaking new information in the movie theater tragedy. We are now uncovering the psychiatrist treating the accused gunman, James Holmes, was so concerned about his behavior, she notified others at the university. Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia is live.
John, you learned this concern came 6 weeks before the shooting.
That's right, Mike. As you know, there are federal, state, and local agencies working this case, and sources familiar with the investigation say that it was in the first 10 days of June that Dr. Lynn Fenton, the psychiatrist treating James Holmes, well, she contacted the team concerned that he could potentially harm others. In the wake of the July 20th theater killings, investigators soon learned, and court documents confirmed, that James Holmes had been treated by a CU psychiatrist for weeks prior to his dropping out of the University of Colorado's neuroscience PhD program. Multiple sources tell Call 7 investigators that Holmes told the psychiatrist, Dr. Lynn Fenton, something so disturbing that she notified several members of the university's Behavioral Evaluation and Threat Assessment, or BETA team, of a potential danger. According to our sources and the university website, the so-called BETA team has staff members from various departments, including the Counseling Center, Legal Counsel, Student Life Office, Campus Police, and Student Services. These members have expertise to, quote, provide support and information and referrals to those dealing with threatening or disruptive situations. According to ABC News, Dr. Lynn Fenton is one of the experts who helped form the team in 2010. University officials confirm she is a current member of the team and can convene the group in conjunction with the team chairman. Sources tell the Call 7 investigators that Fenton made initial phone calls about engaging the BETA team in the first 10 days of June, but the team never came together because James Holmes, after he failed a preliminary exam 3 days earlier, dropped out of school on June 10th. After that date, CU officials said last week they know of no other contact.
He initiated the paperwork on June 10th, and I may be speaking out of line, but it's my understanding he has not been back on campus or in the program since that time.
The university now confirms that Holmes lost his access pass on June 12th. And sources say that when Holmes withdrew, BETA team members simply did not think they had any control over him. Multiple sources also confirm that no one at the university contacted Aurora police about Holmes prior to the theater killings. One source noting that while Fenton had serious concerns, there may not have been an immediate threat. Another source explained that it takes more than just statements, noting Holmes would have had to tell Dr. Fenton something specific before it would trigger a call to law enforcement. Last week, a top official of CU seemed confident in the university's actions.
To the best of our knowledge at this point, we did everything that we think we should have done.
But a threat assessment expert who consults with the Secret Service, among other clients, says Holmes leaving the university should have been a significant red flag.
I think that's a signal, that you should intensify your efforts, not walk away.
Barry Spodak says it could have signaled that Holmes had reached his end.
Under those circumstances, most well-trained threat assessment teams would have gone into action.
Now, sources tell us that after the killings, police interviewed at least one of the people Dr. Fenton called about Holmes' behavior. The university spokesman declined comment today, citing a court-imposed gag order on CU officials. Now, another important note here. Even though the beta team was never convened to deal with Holmes, we do not know whether Dr. Fenton continued to talk with Holmes or treat him after he dropped out, or whether she actually referred him to another psychiatrist. And we don't know what Holmes said that caused such serious concern.
7 News and the Call 7 investigators breaking new information in the movie theater tragedy. The CU Threat Assessment Team is designed to detect and prevent on-campus threats. The Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia found the team has no standards or rules for when it's to be notified or when it's to be convened.
John, you've been asking questions of the person who heads that team.
That's right, Mike. We have reported that Dr. Lynn Fenton, the psychiatrist treating accused killer James Holmes, called other members of the university's threat assessment team with concerns that he might be a danger to others. Well, that team never convened. Now, our investigation has found the CU team has no guidelines to determine whether or not it should act.
Could you talk to me?
Larry Lofton is chairman of the CU Behavioral Evaluation and Threat Assessment, or what is known as the Beta Team. Sources familiar with the investigation confirm he is one of the people James Holmes' psychiatrist called with concerns about her patient. We asked Lofton if he would discuss Beta Team policies and procedures.
You can't?
6 weeks prior to the killings at this Aurora theater, sources say that the psychiatrist, Lynn Fenton, expressed to Beta Team members that Holmes could be a threat to others. But they say that she was also asking whether they had heard of any previous problems with Holmes or a criminal history. Said one source, she was gathering information to couple with what she knew to make an educated decision about what to do concerning Holmes. The university website notes the team includes representatives from the Counseling Center, Legal Counsel, Student Life Office, Campus Police, and Student Services. Said one source, it is very unusual to get a call from Dr. Fenton. There was no clear red flag thrown at the CU assessment team. It wasn't a warning. But another source noted the calls were twofold, to gather information and to report her concerns about what he told her, and that he could potentially harm others. She was trying to figure out what to do. As we have reported, the threat assessment team never met and dropped the matter when Holmes left the neuroscience PhD program on June 10th. While the Beta Team chairman declined comment on policies and procedures, a university spokeswoman admitted that the threat assessment team has no defined policy or threshold of when the team should be convened or to be notified of threats. We also learned that the Beta Team chairman has been called about a dozen times since 2010, when Dr. Lynn Fenton helped organize the group. The university spokesman would not confirm that the chairman, Larry Lofton, was contacted in this instance. As we've previously noted, we do not know what James Holmes told his psychiatrist that caused her so much concern, but it's now clear there are no specific policies or procedures in place or any checklists that directed or required the Beta Team to take any action. I'm John Ferrugia, 7 News.
And we start tonight with breaking news. The Call 7 investigators revealing new information about the concerns of a CU psychiatrist who treated Aurora movie theater suspect James Holmes. So let's get right to Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia.
John, she called the CU Police Department asking for a background check.
That's right, 6 weeks, Mike, before the shooting. As we first reported, Dr. Lynn Fenton, the psychiatrist treating James Holmes, called several members of the university's threat assessment team in the first 10 days of June, concerned that Holmes might harm others. Well, multiple sources familiar with the investigation now tell me that those calls included one to the University of Colorado Police Department to find out if Holmes had a criminal record and to tell an officer of her concerns. Dr. Lynn Fenton had to take a serious step of revealing Holmes' name to law enforcement to ensure protection of others, indicating, say a number of experts we spoke with, just how serious she took Holmes' behavior. But sources say when Dr. Fenton found Holmes had no criminal record, she did nothing to prompt the campus police to detain the now accused killer. As we reported last week, sources say Fenton also called the chairman of the beta team, Larry Lofton, with the same concerns. But the threat assessment team never convened to consider whether Holmes presented a risk, because Holmes dropped out of school on June 10th. Now, a number of forensic psychiatrists contacted today who are unrelated to this case tell us that in such circumstances, a treating doctor has the option of having a patient taken to an emergency room for evaluation, or they may place that patient on a 72-hour hold for observation or some other evaluation.
And did she take any specific action?
Well, the fact is, my sources say Dr. Fenton did not place Holmes on hold, and we don't know whether she had him evaluated in an emergency room or any other venue, but it doesn't seem at this point like she took any action, and we know the threat assessment team did not.
And we know you're continuing to follow us. Thank you, John.
New documents obtained by the Call 7 investigators show the University of Colorado psychiatrist treating the theater shooting suspect was apparently looking at him as a high-risk threat. Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia has been looking through hundreds of CU's internal documents. He joins us now with more on that.
Well, Mitch, we found the documents make it clear that best practices require the threat assessment team, or the beta team, to call police when a student is at high risk to hurt himself or others. What's more, that call is to be made when beta staff believe a person has taken what is noted as preparatory steps to act. Days before accused Aurora shooter James Holmes dropped out of CU, his treating physician was concerned that he was a threat to others. And as Call 7 investigators first reported, Dr. Lynn Fenton called campus police. Now, documents obtained by 7 News include this threat matrix. It outlines how to deal with various threats by disturbed students or staff. It's broken down into 5 priority levels. The document indicates only at level 4, labeled high risk, is the threat assessment team to initiate contact to facilitate a law enforcement response. Sources familiar with the investigation have confirmed to us that Dr. Fenton, who had been treating Holmes for weeks, called campus police to initiate a background check on him. Her concern about the possibility of Holmes harming others was so serious that she broke confidentiality, giving his name to a police officer. But even after she called CU police and at least one other beta team member to discuss Holmes, she apparently failed to follow up and do other things suggested in the high-risk category, like develop an active monitoring and management plan and possible liaison with local police to compare red flags. The team never met to develop such a plan, nor, sources tell us, did anyone call local police. That's because James Holmes dropped out of school on June 10th and left the campus. The documents we obtained also describe cases where the threat assessment team did meet or convene and had campus police intervene. For example, a student who wrote a letter described as concerning but not an imminent direct threat. According to documents obtained by 7 News, he was met by a police officer at the beginning of class. Another example, a student threatened to stab a professor in the eye with a pencil. The beta team met on that incident, even though documents show the professor didn't feel particularly threatened. And a student upset about his grades told a teacher he would not sit back and take it. Records obtained by 7 News show that police were called to the photo lab to talk to that student. In addition, the documents show the beta team responsible for both the Anschutz campus and the Denver campus has dealt with more than 300 threats in the past 4.5 years. Now, 2 weeks ago, university officials told us there were no fixed policies for when the beta team must act. But after the Call 7 investigators examined internal documents and found clear evidence to the contrary, including that threat matrix document, a spokesperson admitted that, in fact, the documents represent the national best practice the team tries to follow. The spokesman confirmed that it is this practice that Dr. Lynn Fenton, the accused shooter psychiatrist, helped put together when the threat assessment team was formed. Of course, the question now is did she follow best practice in this case, or did she really think James Holmes wasn't a high-risk threat? That's what we don't know yet.
Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia learning the doctor treating Aurora movie theater suspect James Holmes contacted 2 professional colleagues at CU. Dr. Len Fenton treated Holmes for several weeks prior to his leaving CU and only 6 weeks before the shootings. However, it's unclear whether her colleagues actually met with Holmes. The Call 7 investigators first to confirm through sources that Dr. Fenton contacted CU's threat assessment team and an officer at the campus police, expressing her concern about Holmes. She also asked and received a background check. Her actions breaking doctor-patient confidentiality. The specific nature of her concern is unknown. Holmes is now charged with the murders of 12 people and the wounding of 58 others at the Cinemark Century 16 Theater in Aurora last month.
Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia learning within the last 90 minutes that CU is retaining lawyers for several university employees in the case surrounding Aurora movie theater suspect James Holmes. Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia is live.
John, these employees had some role in considering the concerns surrounding Holmes or how to deal with him weeks prior to the shootings.
Yeah, Mike, that's right. We've learned that lawyers have been retained for employees of the University Community Standards and Wellness Department. This is the department that includes the chairman of the University Threat Assessment, or Beta team. Sources say he was notified by Holmes' psychiatrist 6 weeks before the shooting of the accused gunman's potential to harm others. Lawyers have also been retained, we've learned, for employees and psychiatrists within the student health, mental health services. And this is in addition to Holmes' psychiatrist, Dr. Lynn Fenton. As we've reported previously, sources say Fenton consulted with 2 other colleagues in the department about Holmes. The university is also retaining attorneys for employees within the Office of the Dean of Students. And the Dean of Students is also part of the Beta team. A university spokesperson confirming tonight these are in addition to the attorneys retained to represent the campus police officer who was called by Dr. Fenton with concerns that Holmes might be a threat. Sources say Fenton asked for and received a criminal background check on Holmes from that officer. Now, this new information is an indication of the university's clear, increasing concern about liability in the Holmes case. And it's also an indication of the widening ring of people at the university who had at least some knowledge of the concerns about Holmes weeks prior to the Aurora killings. Live in the newsroom, I'm John Ferrugia, 7 News.
New tonight, the Call 7 investigators breaking news in the Aurora Theater shooting case. When the CU psychiatrist treating suspect James Holmes called campus police, sources tell us there was a discussion about putting Holmes on a mental health hold. Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia breaking new information. Now, John, you've learned the psychiatrist declined to ask for that hold.
That's right, Mike. And what is also new information is that Dr. Lynn Fenton made calls not only to campus police, but to other members of the university's Threat Assessment, or Beta team, the day after Holmes submitted paperwork to drop out of school and the day before his campus pass was revoked. It was 6 weeks before 12 people were killed in the Aurora Theater when sources say accused murderer James Holmes told his psychiatrist, Dr. Lynn Fenton, something so disturbing that she called members of the CU Threat Assessment Team and campus police, telling them Holmes could be a threat to others. Sources familiar with the investigation now tell me that Fenton made those calls the day after Holmes submitted paperwork to drop out of the university. This is significant because, as we have reported, on June 7th, Holmes failed an oral exam necessary for him to continue in CU's neuroscience PhD program, and he did not have a required mentor. In the afternoon on that same day, Holmes purchased an AR-15 assault rifle at this store in Thornton. Holmes had already purchased a .40 caliber Glock handgun at Gander Mountain and a 12-gauge shotgun at Bass Pro Shop. On June 10th, Holmes submitted paperwork to withdraw from the university. And on June 12th, his security card was canceled by the university and he could no longer access secure areas or labs. But sources say it was the day before, on June 11th, that Dr. Lynn Fenton made the calls concerned that Holmes could be a threat. Multiple sources say that when Fenton called the campus police asking for and receiving a background check on Holmes, there was a discussion of whether to detain Holmes on a mental health hold. Multiple sources familiar with the investigation say the CU officer had no independent information or warrants that would have allowed the campus police to pick up Holmes. But sources say the officer deferred to Dr. Fenton, asking whether she wanted to order what is known as an M1 hold on Holmes, which would have given psychiatrists up to 72 hours to assess his mental state. Multiple sources say Dr. Fenton declined the hold. As we have previously reported, several sources confirm that because Holmes had left campus on June 10th, the threat assessment team never convened and local police were never called. Now, mental health and threat assessment professionals we have spoken with say that when Holmes dropped out of school, it should have been a serious red flag, especially when coupled with concern about his threat to others. Now, the university has retained lawyers not only for Dr. Lynn Fenton, but several members of the threat assessment team and members of the mental health team at the CU Anschutz campus, including other psychiatrists. Now, we contacted one of Fenton's lawyers tonight. He cited a court gag order saying he could not comment.
The Call 7 investigators obtaining new documents today about the schools that James Holmes applied to before entering the neuroscience program at CU. Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia continues our team coverage. And John, you've learned at least one university adamantly denied his application.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. We're learning that James Holmes applied to many university neuroscience programs before deciding on the University of Colorado. One of those applications went to the University of Iowa at Iowa City. Now, Holmes' pitch to be part of that program is essentially the same one he sent to the University of Illinois. Those documents, as you know, were released earlier. However, the response to his application in Iowa was far different. Internal emails showed that a PhD director of the neuroscience graduate program wrote regarding James Holmes, "Do not offer admission under any circumstances." In a separate email, another professor wrote, you can see it there, "I agree with Dan, don't admit." Now, we confirmed that both had personally interviewed Holmes. One additional interesting note in Holmes' admission packet. He wrote about his role as a counselor and mentor at a teenage summer camp. "I mentored a kid with schizophrenia," he wrote. "At 3:30 a.m., he woke up and vacuumed the ceiling of our cabin. These kids were heavily medicated, but this did not solve their problems, only create new ones. I wanted to help them, but I couldn't." This is where neuroscience research becomes invaluable. Now, it's ironic that one question surrounding the accused killer is whether he's mentally ill and might be a schizophrenic. Now, I contacted a member of the University of Iowa admissions team who interviewed Holmes and many other graduate school candidates. He told me he had no specific recollection of Holmes, that many students are rejected simply because, for various reasons, they just don't seem to be a good fit with the university neuroscience program. In the newsroom, I'm John Ferrugia, 7 News.
The Call 7 investigators breaking news right now, uncovering exclusive information about what James Holmes told his psychiatrist that prompted her to call police 6 weeks before the Aurora movie theater tragedy, and why Dr. Lynn Fenton did not have Holmes detained on a 72-hour mental health hold for evaluation. Call 7 investigator John Ferrugia working this case from the beginning. And John, you have answers to some very key questions.
We do, Ann. The theater shooting investigation, as you know, is among the most extensive in Colorado history, involving multiple state, federal, and local law enforcement agencies, as well as the University of Colorado. Now, sources familiar with this investigation say that in early June of this year, James Holmes specifically began talking, speculating, maybe even fantasizing about killing a lot of people.
Somebody is still shooting inside theater number 9.
6 weeks before the massacre at the Aurora Theater, Dr. Lynn Fenton called the CU Police Department asking for a background check on one of her patients, James Holmes. The date was June 11th, and it was among a series of calls to various campus staff that day who were part of the university's threat assessment team, also known as the Beta Team. Sources now tell me that Dr. Fenton told the CU police officer, a contact for the Beta Team, that she was concerned because James Holmes, who was a mental health patient, had been talking about killing a lot of people. Fenton was so concerned about the threat that she broke her doctor-patient confidentiality, giving the officer Holmes' name so the officer could run a criminal background check. Holmes had no criminal background or any history of violence. Sources confirmed that this was one of at least 2 calls Dr. Fenton made to the CU police officer about Holmes on June 11th, as she worried about the threat Holmes may pose. In the last call, sources say the CU officer asked Dr. Fenton if she wanted Holmes picked up for a 72-hour mental health evaluation. As his psychiatrist, Fenton could order such a hold. And sources say the officer deferred to the doctor's judgment. Sources familiar with the investigation now confirm that Dr. Lynn Fenton told the officer that Holmes had put in his notice that he was withdrawing from the university, that the hold was not necessary in part because Holmes was leaving the campus anyway. As we previously reported, sources say that is also why members of the university's threat assessment team dropped the issue, because Holmes was leaving the campus, and because they no longer considered him a student, they did not think they had authority over him. Now, the obvious question here is this. If Holmes had not given notice that he was leaving the campus, would Dr. Lynn Fenton had him detained? Sources familiar with the investigation confirmed that the female campus officer kept notes of this conversation with the psychiatrist, and she notified her police supervisor, but no official report was filed. Because there was no crime involved and Dr. Lynn Fenton declined the 72-hour mental health hold, the police had no legal reason to detain Holmes. What is also now clear is why Dr. Lynn Fenton felt she had to take serious steps of breaking confidentiality. That's potentially a federal crime. Well, she was obviously concerned that his discussion of killing a lot of people could constitute a very deadly threat and possibly put a lot of people on that campus in danger. But again, she declined to do the 72-hour hold. He left school.
It is chilling to hear all those new details,
Yeah.
John. Thank you very much.